Well, it's martini time again. And I got my little frog, and we're going to send him down into the pond to come up with an insight, a little golden ball. And so I've had a fun with an insight today. I've been working on Trump has been kind of like a Zen cone to me. I've been trying to put him into, everyone has, into historical context. What is he? Where did he come from? He's kind of like Mr. Bean, just kind of like, and he's walking around, here I am. What is the historical context? It doesn't satisfy understanding just to say, to define him in psychological terms or negative terms or positive terms because he's an enigma. That's what I mean. He's a paradox. He doesn't fit the context. He's kind of like a square in the quilt that's from another quilt. Where did this square come from? The media journalists are going nuts trying to define Trump and the whole thing. And everybody's saying it's never been like this before. This has never happened. This can't be happening. It's kind of like the obelisk in 2001, Space Odyssey. Remember that thing, that big black obelisk comes down? The monkeys couldn't figure it out and the astronauts couldn't figure it out. Had no reference. It had no reference, you see. All the other presidents have a historical reference. They're either good, low, you see what I mean? I mean, they're measured by comparing them to other presidents. Trump doesn't compare. We can't find a reference, he's plopped in there. Where did he come from? From alien? No. From the future? Is he? No. Can't find him in the past. They keep trying to find maybe Andrew Jackson. You can't. So he's an anomaly. So where did he come from? Well, I figured it out today. So Trump came from the '60s. He's a hippie. He's a hippie king. I always wondered, I was teaching high school in the 60s, the late 67, 65 to 70, and I was teaching high school in Northern Virginia. And so all those kids that I was teaching were the hippies. They became the baby boomers. And now they're all retiring, and they voted for Trump. So before that, it was the Tea Party. So what was significant about that generation that makes me think that's my historical reference for Trump? Well, if you remember, it was defined as the me generation. And in the 60s, if you watch Mad Men, that's the perfect documentary to go to because you saw the whole eruption of me in the 60s. The 50s was an it generation. Right? The 50s wasn't not a generation. The 50s was an it society. Everything was defined externally. Everything was defined by obedience to social rules. No sex in the movies. You can't even mention pregnancy. You can't mention the body. Everything is segregated. Black and white, black and, schools, everything's segregated, everything's in place. A pretty monolithic society that erupted out of the ashes of World War II, driven by a utopia, science utopia. Remember in the 50s, the science magazines, the Jetsons and all of that. By now we should all be flying around in little robot planes, just pushing buttons and having little robots bring everything to us. It was scientific utopia. in the 50s. Science would bring us everything. Science was the genie. It won the war. It's going to bring us a utopia of permanent pleasure and peace, you see. So in the 60s, this egg cracked open, and for the first time, the Vietnam War contributed to this. But you see, in the 50s, it was unthinkable that you didn't do your country right or wrong. You went to the Korean War. Don Draper and the madman, he went to the Korean War. He volunteered, right? So, but the 60s there was a war, and the young people said, I'm not going. It's an unjust, it's an absurd war. I'm going to follow my own drummer. I'm not, instead of fitting into the objective social contract, I'm going to follow my own contract. You see, so me became the reference instead of society. So that created a great rift, which came to a pimple in the Democratic contention of 1968. So you have the values of the me generation were different from the values of the objective view. So there are two views. Now these two views, this is I get from my experience and my study of Zen, is that there are two ways of knowing or awareness. They're both valid. They're both contradictory. We use them both off and on, but we don't realize it. There is the objective way of knowing, which is I see everything as an it and I can study it through science. This view was born in the Enlightenment. And it was so successful, it built things, steam engines, electronics, our whole world is built by this view. It's called scientific imperialism, scientific, it's called secular, humanistic, empirical materialism. Just made that up, but I mean, everything is empirically verified. So everything is a material thing. The soul is a ghost, can't find it. Consciousness, can't find it, it's a ghost in the machine. But the subjective view is there all the time. Now here's the difference. When you go to a movie, the two different awarenesses is awareness of, all right? You are separate, it's the awareness of view is the ego viewpoint, where you are outside of the universe aware of. You are outside of experience aware of it. So you are aware of things and you're aware of yourself as an object and your thoughts are form. So you are aware of form, but you're outside of it. Otherwise you couldn't be aware of it. Awareness as, which is the subjective view, is awareness as form. Now here's the difference. So when you go to a movie, you're in the objective view. You're sitting around, popcorn, theater, lights, screen, people, all objects. And you're an object. You're an object in there. The lights go down, the screen comes down. Now you drop that view, and now you are awareness as. Now you are aware as the movie. You're in the movie, in the viewpoints from everybody. Now you're the husband, now you're the lover, now you're the wife, now you're the enemy. You see what I mean? So now I'm awareness as, so it's like a dream. When you're in a dream, you're aware as the dream, you see. You're not outside of it in space and time looking at the dream, which is where you are when you wake up. Now I'm in the objective view looking at the dream, but during the dream, we are aware as the dream. Read a novel, you're aware as the novel. Watch a movie, you're aware as the movie, you see. So anytime that awareness shifts, I've thought of this today. Awareness of builds a motorcycle. You got the manual, parts, everything is logical, cause and effect, named and defined, you build it. Perfect. Then when you ride on it and become the motorcycle, Now you're in awareness as. So when you really become bonded with the motorcycle, your awareness as the motorcycle. Avatar. Awareness of is the sky people. Awareness as is the Navajo. They're aware as Pandora. They get on a horse, and they're aware as the horse. They get on a flying dragon, they're aware as the dragon. So they are bonded with the dragon. They don't tell the dragon where to go. They just want to go somewhere, and the dragon goes because they're bonded. They're the same. Aware as, you see. So with awareness as, you get wonder, you get meaning because you are it, you see. Awareness of, you figure out how to do something, but it has no meaning. It's just a bunch of its. I mean, you get some pleasure, but it's temporary. But I mean, the it world, in a materialistic world, will tell you how to do things, but it won't tell you why you're here. It won't tell you what your purpose is. It won't give you value in the sense of knowing who I am. See, the two questions of the two views, the objective question is, what is man? The subjective question is, what am I? What am I is an urgent question. I want to know what I am. What's my purpose? What's my meaning here, you see? The other question is, well, let me find a scientific book and read up about it. I can learn all about it, you see, but I still won't know who I am, you see. So these two views are like this, back and forth. But our worldview, the world of our civilization, is dominated by the objective view. And for a large part, we just discount or dismiss the subjective view. It's the conflict between idealism and realism. Realism, traditional classic argument, is everything is matter. Idealism is everything is mind. You see? And this is, again, to the spiritual debate now going on, because the Eastern view is subjective. You see, in the 60s, it opened up and all the Eastern philosophy came in, and that's the subjective view. The Eastern view is subjective, that's why they don't have science over there and machines and technology. Of course, they do now because they got it from us. But I mean, our view created science and technology, but we lost our soul. So they kept their soul and their awareness, but they didn't change the material world. So now we're switching back and forth. But in the 60s, it was new. This was new and exciting and waking up. So then, if you recall, the 70s came. There was the big pimple of 1968. And the utopia of the hippies, the hippie utopia, was that we can all get to nirvana. We can all get to peace here. Have some pot, smoke a flower. It was like nirvana without the work. It was like spiritual awakening without doing anything, without sweating, without deconstructing the ego. They didn't do any work. It was just blown in, full blown. The awakening, full blown, bam. And you can't ride that tiger. Now, I know it happened to me personally. A lot of us have that experience where you get a sudden influx of energy and awareness or something, and it dissipates, or you can't ride it, or you wreck your car or something, because you never did the disciplined spiritual work of figuring out how your ego works and deconstructing it, you see. So that when that energy comes in, the ego takes it over and says, I'm great, we're going somewhere, yippee, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Okay, so anyway, getting back to our thesis here, hope you're staying with me, is that you have this, the me generation, the hippie movement, the 60s got put back into its playpen because 70s was a mess. It was androgynous, the fashions were all mixed up, men looked like women, women looked like men, everybody had a new right. The cities were going to hell, rioting, drugs, and so we called in Dirty Harry and Reagan. So Reagan and Dirty Harry came in and gave law and order. We're going to put a cork on this thing, and get back to the objective view and just make some money. Okay? So the objective view came back and just put this down, boom, 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 you see. And that became the conservative movement. Law and order, security, patriotism, conform to the duties of society. Don't all these individual rights and all this me stuff. It's just chaotic, Just that we need to select a Supreme Court judge who won't keep creating more rights. We don't need any more rights. That individual rights was a subjective view. Women's rights, civil rights, LBJ rights, workers' rights, poor people's rights, disabled people's rights. Where do these rights come from? You see, who else is... I just had an ironic thought today, was that the NRA is just right out of that movement, because the NRA says gun rights. Here's another one. We have rights too. We want to put a gun in every house, in every place, everything. Gun rights. So it's a new right. Anyway, how do we get to Trump? How did we get to Trump, you see? Well, Trump is a me person. He lives in a me Trump world. His whole life he's been in a Trump world. Now he's just transported Trump world to the presidency, and there's some conflict because the presidency is in the objective, liberal, secular, humanistic world that is our civilization. You have to accept that fact, that we don't live in a magical alchemy, magical world. We live in an objective, rational world. We live in a rationally ordered world. If we didn't, we would all be, the only answer to that is tribalism. Okay? So that's why, we're having a war with Afghanistan. Well, Afghanistan is a tribal society, and that's a subjective society. We're in its society. It's Sky People and Pandora all over again. But anyway, getting back to Trump. So he is really the personification of me. This is the key. He's a narcissist. Well, narcissist means me is at the center. All values reference me. So if the values are the facts, and he speaks in value terms. Everything is the biggest, the greatest, the most wonderful, the longest, the tallest. These are value terms. They're not measurements that you see. They're not measurements. It's a value. Big is value. You see. So everything is value. So he's a value preacher. He's a value spokesman. He's talking values, not objective facts. So when you connect with Trump, now I don't want to get into, right or wrong and everything. I'm just trying to bring some understanding, because this is a valid view. The subjective view and the objective view are both equally valid, but we don't understand how they have to play together. We think it's one or the other. But one or the other is one wing of the eagle instead of two wings. And you can't fly unless you have both wings of awareness going. Otherwise, you go in a circle. And the other one comes back and tips you over. So anyway, so the idea that I'm working with here is Trump is reference to this subjective view of reality, which is value-orientated, and which uses me as the center. And he has to keep restoring his center. He can't, you'll notice that he can't stay in the White House. He has to get to his property. He has to get to a rally. He has to get to some applause. That's vital to him, because his center, you see, is his power, his charisma. Trump has charisma. His charisma is his power, and his power derives from his center, which is staked in his story. Trump is the greatest. Muhammad Ali, Trump is the greatest. I'm the greatest, you see. So he's the Muhammad Ali of politics. I'm the greatest, and if you get in my tent, you'll be great too. So there's an identification going on there with people who are in Trump's tent, which is a personal identification. It's not an objective identification, like, oh, these policies and all of that. Policies, phooey. It's value. You see, I identify with Trump because he makes me feel valuable. That's all. So whether he gets you health care or not is irrelevant. As long as you feel valuable, you can be without health care and feel valuable and be okay. You see, so he gives value under his tent. But his tent collapses when it's in the ocean of objectivity, in the objective view, which is the presidency. The whole country is objective, rational, okay? And Trump is like a tribe. Trump is like a tent, a revival. Churches, evangelical churches do this. I mean, the energy to the church, the center of the church is Jesus. And the minister's there every day, every week, you know, and you same sermon, and the energy goes down. Whoa. And everybody's attendance drops off, and you don't get juiced up. You haven't got any reason to keep going, to keep the thing blown up. You know, so they bring in a revivalist, you know. He comes in like a circus, and he pumps everybody up again, and you're full of energy, and you go out, energy, bumping, yay, we're up, and then it goes, whoa. So Trump has to go to revival to get pumped up, to get his energy back. He can't function without that energy because the center is not referenced to the whole, it's referenced to his own personal story. So that creates a conflict between his personal story, his personal reality, his Trump reality, and the objective, these are subjective facts. That's why Kellyanne Conway put it right on the nail. He goes by an alternative facts. The alternative facts are subjective facts and not objective. Out in the world with journalism and news, it's all objective, empirical. If you have a fact, you have to have at least alternate sources, you see. You can't have one source. So Trump's a one-source fact. It's true because I say it's true. That's one source, you see. So it can't be verified with external. It's like something on a map that has no reference to anything else on the map. It's like a GPS map in the middle of a flat atlas map. If you look at a flat atlas map, say you're in the car, you got a GPS, your wife's got a map, what happens? She's saying, all right, there's one way to go from here to there, and don't screw up. So you go, which way do I turn? Which way? So you got to fit to the map. The reference to your reality is the coordinates of the map in space and time, objective coordinates out there. And there's only one way to go that's straight. And if you make the wrong turn, you're bad. You know, you idiot, you know. All right, plug in a GPS map. Okay? Now, whatever way you turn, you're still going home. The reference changes. Now, you're the center of the world in the GPS map. You can look at it. You move left, the world shifts around you. You're always at the center. So you can go anywhere you want to, and the navigator says, turn right, turn left, you're going home, everything's fine. You're not an idiot, you're not an idiot, you did good. You're always going home. You're always at place because your center is me, you see. So this is just metaphors here, just two different ways of looking at these realities. These are two different worlds. Two different worlds, you see. And we live in them all the time, but we move back and forth without any effort or anything. We only get into trouble when we try to put them both together and they conflict, and we have a choice between the objective choice and the value choice. Do I really want to go with this person? Oh, everybody says I should go, that's objective. But personally, I don't feel the truth of this person, you see. I don't feel it. So feeling values are subjective. Rational values are objective. And we're constantly playing between these two coordinates, these two worlds, reality. They're really realities. They're just as, each one is just as real. You go to a movie, that reality, when you suspend your objective world, that's called suspension of belief. You go to a movie, you suspend the objective awareness, You are the movie. Unless somebody pokes you and says, give me some popcorn. Then you say, will you shut up? I'm giving you the movie, you see. So we want to go in that world because we can go anywhere. Read a book, you go anywhere. You see, that's the subjective world. Get in a video game, you're in the video game. So we pay for this view. Entertainment, art, makes us pay for the subjective view because it's so enjoyable to have value and to be as the world, to be one with the world. As soon as we drop that subjective view, we're back in exile. We're out of the garden. We're wandering around as a thing among things, and they're all bumping into me like bumper cars. And I don't know who I am. Just another thing. An accident. We're an accident, you see. You see, the Copernican revolution gave the Catholic medieval church a trauma because up until that point, the earth was the center of the world. That was a subjective world. The earth, God put it there, man, the center. Wherever you go, there's the whole, I'm the center. But the Copernican and the objective view came in, and it displaced the center. So now I'm just among other things. I'm not the center. You see, I'm not the creator. I'm not the center of the world. I'm just a thing in the world. And then evolution came along and did another double stroke. You see, the second bite. So evolution took man out of the took man away as the top species. You see, before evolution, man was the man was next to God. He was the top species, you see, and then all the other species come down. But evolution puts man on equal terms with everyone, all the other organisms. So here again, we were knocked off the center, knocked off, our center couldn't hold, and we're this is why that conflict goes on today. It's a loss of center, it's a loss of value, it's a loss of meaning, it's a loss of place, okay? But you can't do one or the other. You can't just have all objective, because we know what that feels like, there's no meaning, and you can't have all subjective, because then you become psychotic, or you go crazy, you're just in a little bubble. And then you get a cult is a subjective worldview. The cult leader is the center, and everybody is around it like ants around the queen. And they're very threatened, Jim Jones, very threatened by any external rational attacks on your cult, like Scientology or anything. That, there's the world, the rational world attacks it because it's not rational. But you hold on to it and double down, you see, and put up defense shields because it gives you meaning. But they can't hold because the charisma goes, the leader dies, the power wanes. How do you keep the power? How do you keep the charisma? The guru dies, you see. So that when the center goes, when it's built on a person, when that center goes or weakens, the reality collapses, you see. And that's death. People, it's like death. I remember when I was in the 70s, I was in Siddha Yoga with Swami Muktananda, and he died in 1982. And I was in D.C. Ashram. He died in India. And I remember when Baba died, it was a death. It was a collapse of meaning. Everything just collapsed. Everybody's crying, because when the teacher dies, or in families, when the mother dies, or the father, there's the matriarch, the mother holds everything together. When she dies, the family, it's like ants when you lift the rock up, everybody's, the big hole there, you see. So these are subjective realities that give you value. So I was looking at, we'll close up now, but I was just looking at Trump from that reference point, that he provides value in a world where people, particularly for people who don't have value. So the people that are attracted to Trump are displaced people. They're people who lost their jobs. They've lost their value, lost their place in life. You see, so the one thing they want is value. See, so he's not so much as giving you value in the future, he's giving you value now. Value is always now. It's not an object in time. It's now. You feel value. You don't, value is feeling. Feeling is now. You can't feel value in the future. I mean, you can work to get something, but you feel value now, you see. And you don't want that value taken away from you now, you see. So this is a now politician, in the sense that he's providing now value now, which has nothing to do with policy, has nothing to do with the country, really. It really is about providing value to his people, you know. And so the incompatibility, you see, of Trump in this field is because he's like, you know, he's like well, like I said, a revivalist in a tent. And so the only people in the tent are getting value, and everyone else is saying it's cold out here. It doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. You're not doing anything for the whole. You see, you're not doing anything for anybody. You're just providing value. And that is the reference to the me generation, that whole subjective view, you know, where value is referenced to me. Okay? And, you know, so I've been excited about this insight today. I thank my frog for going down into the unconscious and coming up with a golden ball. And I just throw it out here for you. If you like it, fine. If you don't, fine. But it's important, I think, for us to have understanding and context for these great historical movements that we're caught in. So we just don't go, because if we don't have a context, you know, we don't have any value. We're just a bunch of stuff hitting around. It has no meaning. Understanding gives meaning. Understanding gives value. So, thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.